orchestrate a war he desperately wanted to avoid. This is the story of Isoroku Yamamoto, the brilliant Japanese admiral behind the attack on Pearl Harbor. It's a tale not of a war-hungry villain, but of a strategist trapped by fate, politics, and a deep sense of duty. Yamamoto was no stranger to America. He had studied at Harvard and served as a naval attaché in Washington, D.C. He saw firsthand the nation's immense industrial power, its sprawling factories, and its resilient spirit. He knew that if Japan ever went to war with the United States, it would be a conflict his country could not win. He warned his superiors, stating plainly, "I shall run wild for the first 6 months or a year, but I have utterly no confidence for the second or third year." But in the late 1930s, Japan was a nation consumed by militaristic fever. The government was dominated by army hardliners who saw expansion as destiny. They viewed the United States, with its oil embargoes and diplomatic pressure, as the primary obstacle to creating a vast Asian empire. Yamamoto, as the commander-in-chief of the combined fleet, found himself increasingly isolated. His cautious advice was dismissed as weakness. The political currents were too strong, pulling Japan toward a catastrophic collision. Alone in his strategy room, surrounded by maps and naval charts, Yamamoto wrestled with an impossible dilemma. He was a patriot, sworn to protect his emperor and his nation. If war was inevitable, how could Japan survive? A conventional war was unthinkable. The only path he could see, a desperate and terrifying one, was a single, devastating blow that might cripple the American will to fight. It was a gamble born not from arrogance, but from a profound fear for his country's future. The idea of attacking Pearl Harbor began to take shape, a preemptive strike designed to buy Japan time, hoping America might negotiate a peace. In the tensy, smoke-filled rooms of Japan's Imperial General Headquarters, the atmosphere was electric. Top military leaders debated Japan's next move. The army, confident and aggressive, pushed for confrontation. They saw America as a sleeping giant, but one they believed they could intimidate into submission. When Yamamoto finally presented his plan to attack Pearl Harbor, the room fell silent. It was audacious, shocking, and incredibly risky. The idea of sailing a massive fleet across 3,500 miles of open ocean, completely undetected, to strike the heart of the U.S. Pacific Fleet seemed like something from a novel. Many officers were stunned. Some thought it was brilliant, others believed it was suicide. Yamamoto explained his logic with grim precision. A surprise attack was the only way Japan could seize the initiative and gain a temporary advantage. It was their only chance to dictate the early terms of the war. He laid out the intricate details, the coordination of carriers, submarines, and aircraft, a symphony of destruction. Secretly, a part of him hoped the sheer audacity of the plan would cause the leaders to reconsider. He hoped they would see the immense risk and pull back from the brink. But his fears were unfounded. The political leadership, desperate for a decisive victory, embraced the plan with enthusiasm. The dice had been cast. As the date of the attack, December 7, 1941, drew closer, the weight of his decision pressed down on Yamamoto. The architect of the attack became its first casualty, tormented by sleepless nights and crippling anxiety. He knew better than anyone what this strike would unleash. It wouldn't be a quick, clean victory. It would ignite a firestorm, a total war that would consume nations and kill millions. The guilt was a constant companion. He felt a profound sense of sorrow for the coming conflict. Even writing a poignant letter of apology to an American admiral he considered a friend, a letter he would never send. He would look at the faces of the young pilots, boys filled with patriotic fervor, and see them not as heroes, but as ghosts. He knew that many of them, filled with dreams and loyalty, would fly off into the Hawaiian sunrise and never return. They were instruments of a strategy he had created, but their sacrifice haunted him. He wasn't celebrating a masterstroke of military genius. He was mourning a tragedy that had not yet begun. This was the dark paradox of Yamamoto. The man planning Japan's greatest military gamble was also the one who understood its ultimate futility. Under a blanket of absolute radio silence, the Kido Butai, Japan's formidable carrier strike force, sliced through the frigid waters of the North Pacific. 6 aircraft carriers, laden with over 400 planes, steamed toward Hawaii. The secrecy was paramount. A single American patrol plane could doom the entire operation. On the flagship Akagi, Yamamoto wasn't present, but his spirit loomed over the entire fleet. He waited, thousands of miles away, for the coded message that would signal the start of the war. In the early morning hours of December 7th, the first wave of Japanese planes took off. Below them, Pearl Harbor slept. Battleship Row was a picture of peacetime tranquility. Sailors were preparing for Sunday church services, unaware of the metal storm about to rain down from the sky. The attack was a complete and devastating surprise. The first bombs fell just before 8 a.m. Chaos erupted. Explosions tore through the hulls of great battleships like the USS Arizona, which went down in minutes, taking over 1,000 men with it, as reports of staggering success flooded back to Japan. Tora! 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 The code for complete surprise achieved there was jubilation among the high command. But for Yamamoto, each report of a sinking ship or a destroyed airfield only deepened his sense of dread. He had succeeded beyond his wildest expectations, but in doing so, he had sealed his nation's fate. It was in this moment of victory that he is said to have uttered his most famous, prophetic words. I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve. The aftermath of Pearl Harbor was exactly as Yamamoto had feared. Far from shattering American morale, the attack united a fractured nation with a singular purpose: revenge. The sleeping giant awoke, and its industrial might roared to life. Factories that once made cars now churned out tanks and bombers at a rate Japan could never hope to match. The quick, negotiated peace Yamamoto had hoped for was now an impossibility. America was in the fight until the very end. Yamamoto's early prediction came true. After an initial 6 months of stunning victories across the Pacific, the tide began to turn at the Battle of Midway, a catastrophic defeat for the Japanese Navy. Yamamoto knew then that his worst fears were being realized. Japan was locked in a prolonged war of attrition. It simply could not win. For the United States, he became the symbol of the Pearl Harbor attack. Public enemy number one. American intelligence services dedicated enormous resources to tracking his every move. In April 1943, they got their chance. U.S. codebreakers intercepted a detailed itinerary of an inspection tour Yamamoto was planning in the Solomon Islands. On the morning of April 18th, American P-38 Lightning fighters ambushed his transport plane and shot it out of the sky. The architect of Pearl Harbor was killed instantly. In Japan, he was mourned as a national hero, a martyr who died for his country. But the great, tragic irony is that Yamamoto understood the folly of the war more than anyone. He was a man honored for a victory he never wanted, a war he knew would lead to ruin. His story is a timeless reminder that sometimes the most brilliant minds are trapped by the currents of history, forced to walk a path they know leads only to destruction. December 7th, 1941. A quiet Sunday morning in paradise, shattered by the roar of engines and the thunder of explosions. The surprise attack on Pearl Harbor plunged America into a state of shock and outrage. In Washington, D.C., disbelief quickly turned to fury. The nation was wounded, but far from broken. This single act of aggression would awaken a sleeping giant and set in motion a response of unimaginable scale and ferocity. The very next day, President Franklin D. Roosevelt stood before a joint session of Congress. His voice, firm and resolute, echoed across the nation as he declared December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. His words were not just a condemnation, they were a call to arms. Within an hour, Congress voted almost unanimously to declare war on the Empire of Japan. America was officially at war, and the path to retaliation had begun. Immediately, the gears of the American military machine began to turn with breathtaking speed. Forces were mobilized on an unprecedented scale, not just in the Pacific to confront Japan directly, but also in the Atlantic, anticipating the inevitable entry of Japan's allies, Germany and Italy, into the conflict. The attack had united a once divided nation. Across the country, ordinary Americans were filled with a mix of fear, anger, and a powerful sense of determination. Long lines formed at military recruitment centers as men from all walks of life answered the call to defend their country. While the public rallied, Military leaders were deep in strategic planning. The initial shock gave way to a cold, calculated resolve. The objective was clear: hit back, and hit back hard. The U.S. Navy, Army, and the newly emerging Army Air Forces began coordinating a massive, combined counterattack. The sheer geography of the Pacific Ocean presented an immense challenge, but the goal was to systematically dismantle Japan's newly expanded empire. Intelligence became the lifeblood of this new war. After the devastating intelligence failure at Pearl Harbor, American codebreakers and analysts worked tirelessly to track Japanese naval and military movements. Every intercepted message, every piece of reconnaissance, was crucial in piecing together Japan's next moves and planning an effective counteroffensive. This silent war, fought in back rooms with codes and ciphers, would prove just as decisive as the battles fought on the open seas. America needed a victory to restore its shaken morale, and it didn't have to wait long. But the most symbolic blow came just over 4 months after Pearl Harbor. On April 18, 1942, 16 B-25 bombers, led by Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle, took off from the deck of the aircraft carrier USS Hornet. Their target? Tokyo. The Doolittle raid was a mission of incredible audacity. While the physical damage was minimal, its psychological impact was monumental. It proved to the American people that they could strike back at the heart of Japan, and it sent a chilling message to the Japanese leadership that they were not invulnerable. Back home, the American industrial landscape was transforming at a staggering pace. Factories that once produced cars and refrigerators were now churning out ships, planes, tanks, and weapons at a rate the world had never seen. This arsenal of democracy, as Roosevelt called it, was powered by the American people. Civilians participated in the war effort with unwavering dedication. They bought war bonds to finance the fight. They rationed everything from gasoline to sugar, and millions of women, famously symbolized by Rosie the Riveter, entered the workforce, taking on jobs in factories and shipyards to keep production lines running around the clock. This incredible display of resilience and industrial might had a profound effect on Japan's leaders. They had gambled that a swift, devastating blow at Pearl Harbor would shatter American will to fight. They could not have been more wrong. They now faced a nation that was not only enraged but also possessed a seemingly limitless capacity for retaliation. The sleeping giant was fully awake and filled with a terrible resolve. The strategic turning point of the war in the Pacific came in June 1942 at the Battle of Midway, thanks to brilliant code-breaking that allowed the U.S. to anticipate Japan's plan. The American Navy ambushed the Japanese fleet. In a stunning victory, the U.S. sank 4 of Japan's most vital aircraft carriers, the very heart of its naval power. Midway was a devastating blow from which the Japanese Navy would never fully recover. The balance of power in the Pacific had shifted decisively. With the initiative now in their hands, American forces implemented the island-hopping campaign. TS strategy, masterminded by commanders like Admiral Nimitz and General MacArthur, was to bypass heavily fortified Japanese-held islands and instead seize strategically important these captured islands would then serve as forward bases to launch the next attack, creating a stepping-stone path across the vast Pacific, ever closer to Japan itself. This campaign involved a series of brutal and hard-fought naval and land battles. From Guadalcanal to Leyte Gulf, the U.S. Navy systematically decimated what remained of the Japanese fleet. Each victory brought American forces closer to their ultimate goal. The integration of intelligence was key. Codebreaking continued to provide critical advantages, allowing American commanders to anticipate enemy movements and strike with precision. Espionage networks and reconnaissance missions painted a clearer picture of Japanese defenses, saving countless lives and hastening the advance. As the war entered its final year in 1945, the tension was palpable. American forces were on Japan's doorstep. The battles for Iwo Jima and Okinawa were some of the bloodiest of the war, demonstrating the fierce, desperate resistance of the Japanese military. Yet, the relentless advance continued. The American retaliation was dual-sword. It was a series of overwhelming military victories, but it was also framed as a moral crusade. The attack on Pearl Harbor had provided the justification for a total war, aimed at the complete and unconditional surrender of the enemy. Finally, after nearly 4 years of brutal conflict, the war came to an end. in August 1945. The American response to Pearl Harbor stands as a powerful chapter in history. It's a story of how a nation, struck by a sudden and vicious attack, transformed its shock and grief into an unstoppable force. The enduring legacy is one of resolve, unity, and the incredible capacity of a free people to rise up in the face of aggression. The events that followed December 7th, 1941, forever changed the course of the 20th century and left an indelible mark on the world. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this look into history interesting, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into the events that shaped our world. We'll see you in the next one.